At 2:30 in the morning, 5 men in business suits picked the lock on a door in a Washington office building. They were not burglars. They worked for the President of the United States. What they were looking for and how far the cover-up would go would tear the country apart. But long before that night, the White House had already learned that some secrets are worth any price to keep. The story of presidential scandals that were covered up did not begin with a break-in. It began with oil, with cash in bags, and with a president who trusted the wrong man. In the summer of 1921, President Warren Harding handed control of the nation's most valuable oil reserves to a man named Albert Fall. Fall was the Secretary of the Interior. He was also broke. He had borrowed heavily. He needed money within months. Two of those reserves, Teapot Dome in Wyoming and Elk Hills in California, were leased to private oil companies. The transfers were done in secret. No competitive bidding, no congressional oversight, no bidding, no debate. The money did not go to the Treasury. It went into Fall's pockets. Bags of cash delivered in person. The total would later be estimated at hundreds of thousands of dollars, a fortune at the time. When reporters and senators began asking questions, the administration did not open the books. It shut them. Documents vanished. Witnesses were pressured. Senate investigators were stonewalled. Harding stood by his friend. He refused to believe the evidence or chose not to see it. He called the investigations a witch hunt. But the trail was too hot. Fall would become the first cabinet official in American history sent to prison. Harding did not live to see it. He died in 1923 in a San Francisco hotel room while the scandal was still unfolding. His reputation never recovered. The lesson was clear. The cover-up had failed. Yet in the decades that followed, the same pattern would repeat: power, exposure, denial, and the desperate belief that this time the truth could be buried for good. 50 years later, another administration would make the same bet, and the stakes would be even higher. What happened next would prove that no amount of power could make that belief true. In 1972, a security guard named Frank Wills noticed tape on a door in the Watergate complex. He removed it. He found it again. He called the police. The 5 men arrested inside the headquarters of the Democratic National Committee were not ordinary thieves. They had wiretaps. They had cameras. They had addresses and phone numbers linking them to the committee to re-elect the president. Within hours, the White House knew, the president knew, and instead of an investigation, there was a plan, a systematic one, the kind that only people who believe they will never get caught could design. Destroy evidence, pay the defendants to stay silent, block the FBI, lie to the press. The president himself, in a meeting recorded on tape, approved the use of the CIA to shut down the FBI's inquiry. He called it a cancer on the presidency. He did not cut it out. He tried to hide it. For 2 years, the cover-up held, reporters dug, Congress held hearings. One source known only as Deep Throat pointed the way. Then, one by one, the walls cracked. A judge demanded the tapes. The president refused. He claimed executive privilege. The Supreme Court ordered him to hand them over 8-0. The law would not bend. When the tapes were finally heard, one conversation had been erased. 18.5 minutes. No one was ever charged for that erasure. But what remained was enough. Nixon resigned in 1974. Dozens of his aides went to prison. The scandal was not the break-in. It was the lie. The belief that the Oval Office was above the law. The tapes had captured it. The cover-up in the president's own voice. And when the country listened, it did not forget. If you enjoy this deep dive into the hidden side of American power, like this video and subscribe for more stories that never made the front page. But the machinery of concealment did not end there. Another president. Another decade. Another secret that would require lies, shredded paper, and the same hope that the truth would stay buried. Not every cover-up ends in resignation. In 1986, the world learned that the United States had sold weapons to Iran, a nation it had sworn never to arm. The goal was to free American hostages held in Lebanon, a noble cause, some said. But the money from those sales did not go to the government. It did not go to the hostages. It went somewhere else entirely. It was diverted to rebels in Nicaragua, the Contras, at a time when Congress had explicitly banned such aid. The Boland Amendment had made it illegal. The White House had found a way around it. When the scheme was exposed, when a newspaper in Lebanon broke the story, the response was familiar: deny, minimize, destroy. Reagan's aides shredded documents. They gave false testimony. They withheld evidence from investigators. They lied to Congress. They lied to the public. The president went on television and said his administration had not traded arms for hostages. The statement was false. Later, he would say his previous statement had been wrong, that he had been misinformed, that he took responsibility. But the cover-up had already done its work. He claimed he could not remember key meetings. Whether he knew or chose not to know remains debated. What is certain is that the operation was run in secret, and when it surfaced, the machinery of the state moved to conceal it. 11 officials were convicted, some were pardoned. The full story of who gave the orders and who knew what when has never been fully told. What is on the record is the pattern: a secret operation, exposure, and then the rush to contain, to deflect, to make the story disappear. It had happened before. It would happen again, in a different form, under a different roof. Decades before Watergate, another president had faced a different kind of conspiracy, one that would show that even a hero could be pulled into the logic of the cover-up. Ulysses S. Grant was a war hero, honest in the eyes of the public, but his administration was riddled with graft. The whiskey ring was a massive tax fraud. Distillers and federal officials split the money that should have gone to the Treasury, millions of dollars. The scheme reached into the highest levels of the administration, and when it did, the president had to choose between the law and the men who served him. At the center of the scheme was Grant's own private secretary, Orville Babcock. Telegrams between Babcock and the ring's leaders would later surface. When investigators closed in, when the scope of the fraud became clear, Grant did not distance himself. He defended Babcock. He attacked the prosecutors. He wrote a deposition praising his secretary's character. In the end, Babcock was tried and acquitted, in part because Grant's testimony was used in his favor. Other ring members went to prison. Grant's reputation was stained. He had not ordered the fraud, but he had tried to shield the man at his side. He had used the weight of the presidency to protect a friend. The pattern was the same: loyalty over truth, the office over the law. It would not be the last time a president would make that choice. Some cover-ups are not about money or break-ins. They are about war. In August 1964, President Lyndon Johnson went on television and described an attack. American ships in the Gulf of Tonkin, he said, had been fired upon by North Vietnamese forces. Twice. The first attack was real. The second would later be questioned. Congress passed a resolution giving him the power to escalate. Almost no one in the room had seen the full intelligence. American involvement in Vietnam exploded. Years later, declassified documents and testimony would cast doubt on the second attack, whether it happened at all. Whether the intelligence was misread or massaged or fabricated, historians still argue. Declassified documents suggest confusion, conflicting reports, the possibility that sonar echoes were mistaken for enemy fire. What is clear is that the narrative that sent thousands to their deaths was built on a single fragile incident, and that the full story was not laid before the public until years later. And the full picture was not revealed until it was too late. The cost of that uncertainty would be paid in lives, in divided families, in a nation that would spend years asking what it had been told and what it had not. There would be one more kind of cover-up, personal, embarrassing, and no less consequential for how the country would view the line between private life and public trust. In 1998, President Bill Clinton sat before a grand jury and denied having a sexual relationship with a White House intern. He had already denied it in a sworn deposition in a separate lawsuit. He had denied it to his staff, to the public, to his wife. "I did not have sexual relations with that woman." The phrase would echo for years. And when the evidence emerged, when the dress was tested, when the timeline could no longer be denied, the lie had already been sealed in testimony. When the evidence became impossible to ignore, he admitted the relationship, but the lie had already been told under oath. The House impeached him for perjury and obstruction of justice. The Senate did not remove him from office. Historians still debate the weight of the offense. What is documented is this: a president chose to conceal the truth. He lied under oath. He encouraged others to do the same. And when the truth emerged, the cost was measured in trust, in a divided nation, and in an impeachment that would leave a permanent mark on his legacy. Not in prison time, but in the way the country would remember the line between public office and private conduct. Every administration faces temptation. The difference is what happens when the first lie is told. The doors either open or they close. The cover-ups that shape history are not always the work of one person. They are systems. Loyalty, fear, the conviction that the cause is too important for the truth to get in the way. Someone gives the order. Someone carries it out. Someone looks away. We remember the ones that failed. The ones that cracked open under the weight of evidence, or a judge or a tape recorder. Watergate, Teapot Dome, Iran Contra. We rarely know the full cost of the ones that did not. The secrets that stayed secret, the documents that were never found. If you enjoyed this look at the scandals that changed the presidency, like the video and subscribe for more weekly history breakdowns.